Engine, and welcome to our second Tribal Drought webinar. I am the Tribal Resilience Liaison for the North Central region. I work directly for the Great Plains Tribal Water Alliance in coordination with the North Central Climate Adaptation Science Center. And I'm hosting this webinar from the traditional lands of the Ute, Arapaho, Cheyenne peoples, and numerous other indigenous peoples outside of Denver, Colorado. The Great Plains Tribal Water Alliance is a nonprofit intertribal organization that serves as advisory committee to the Great Plains Tribal Chairmen's Association on all matters with regard to technical and policy issues regarding water resources for member tribal nations. If you want to learn more about the Water Alliance or the Climate Adaptation Science Center, I'll put a couple links in the chat after this and you can check them out at your discretion. The goal of this monthly webinar is to provide information, tools, and resources for tribal resource managers to use in addressing climate change. This summer, we're focusing on drought and trying to bring resources to you about regional and local impacts, resources for addressing drought, and information that is useful both near-term and long-term. Today, we have folks from NRCS that will discuss longer-term preparation for drought, as well as our two speakers that will address immediate responses and actions. Our speakers today include Doug Kluck from NOAA, Darrel, Duvall, and Stan Boltz from Natural Resources Conservation Service, Zane Not Afraid from Intertribal Agriculture Council, and Miranda Meehan from North Dakota State Extension. And I'll introduce each of them as we go. This webinar series is being done as a collaboration with several organizations from NOAA's National Integrated Drought Information System, or NIDIS. We have Britt Parker and Molly Wollison. At the USDA Climate Hub, Danelle Peck from High Plains Regional Climate Center, Crystal Stiles and Natalie Umflett, and Doug Kluck from NOAA's National Center for Environmental Information. So just a little bit about NIDIS before we start. NIDIS was established in 2006 by public law with a mission to improve the nation's capacity to proactively manage drought-related risks by providing those affected with the best available information and resources to assess the potential for drought and to better prepare for, mitigate, and respond to the effects of drought. NIDIS is building the foundation of a national drought early warning system through the development of regional DEWs, where networks of partners and stakeholders share information and actions that help communities cope with drought. For a deeper dive into resources such as up-to-date and historical data regarding drought, I recommend checking out NIDIS' website. The National Drought Mitigation Center, National Integrated Drought Information System, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture Climate Hubs are working with states, tribes, and others across the country to collect condition monitoring observer reports on drought, also known as See More Drought, including photos. Your impact reports help us understand how drought is affecting local conditions and you. State officials and U.S. Drought Monitor authors review these reports to help verify the indicators are showing and to identify areas that need more attention. You can also check drought impact reports for your area. And if you're in Montana, you can use the Montana Impact Reporter in the same way. And you can learn more by following these links, which we'll also put in the chat box. Just to note, if you have questions, again, please post them in the chat. We'll either answer them as we go after each speaker, or we'll wait until the very end and you can ask in person or take yourself off mute. Okay. Now for our first speaker, Doug Kluck. He is the Central Regional Climate Services Director for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA. Doug is from Nebraska, but has lived in Kansas City since 2000. He's worked for NOAA since 1992 with the National Weather Service and National Centers for Environmental Information. Doug's region covers 16 states from Colorado to Michigan, known as the North Central US. Doug's responsibilities include collaborating, coordinating, and informing on climate service activities among federal, state, tribal, academics, and private interests in the region. Doug, you can share screen when you're ready. And I forgot to mention Danelle to hit record, so feel free to record if you haven't yet.
I am sharing. Is it not sharing? It says I am sharing the screen.
Oh yeah, yep. I can see your desktop. That's all I can see.
All right, well here. Now what do you see? Do you see anything else?
I see your PowerPoint, but not in presenter mode.
Right on. Well, let's try this again. Okay, is it in presenter mode?
Looks good.
It is?
Yep.
All right. Whoop. All right. So hi, everybody. And hello to those that I know. And hello to those I don't know. So yeah, I'm Doug Kluck. I sit in Kansas City. I do stuff. I do climate stuff, climate services, and part of what I do is part of communication and communicating and translating all this great stuff that NOAA and many others put out there and try to interpret what's going on. I wish I had better news for a number of you, especially as you go north and west into the Missouri Basin. This talk is really focused on the Missouri Basin and Missouri Basin tribes, which is the north central part of the U.S. for the most part, anyway. That's a I don't know if you can see it or not, but that's a picture of a golf course, I think in Aberdeen, South Dakota, and it's not the ponds aren't as hazardous as they normally would be, I guess you would say. If you're a golfer, you know what that means. If you look very closely, you can see a bunch of golf balls out there. But things are drying up, and we'll talk about why a little bit. I'll do this as quickly as I can so we can get to the more important speakers. But I'm going to talk a little bit about how we got to this point very quickly, and then a little bit about what the outlook is for the near term and a little longer term future. And again, I wish I had better things to tell you, but this drought that we're in the north central or northern plains really began last year. Some say last spring. This is just a look back to October 1st of last fall. And the image on the left kind of shows you where temperatures have been above normal. All that yellow, orange, red color are above normal temperatures. And I don't need to tell you that when you have above normal temperatures, you have more evaporation, you have more evapotranspiration, just more moisture happen, or more moisture leaving, if you will, the surface than normal when temperatures are warm, because the air can hold a lot more moisture. The image on the right is a percent of what you normally should get. Again, since October 1st through more or less yesterday, how much precipitation you normally should get and what you actually are. So there are places across, as you can see, North Dakota. North Dakota is the worst, but there's plenty of bad areas around that are less than 70% of normal, and a pretty broad areas of less than half of what they normally get in terms of precipitation from that in that long-term period, which is pretty phenomenal to have that little. Now, notice that the only places that are above normal for that period are eastern Colorado and portions of Kansas, some parts of Nebraska and Missouri. So anyway, so what's it look like in the last 30 days? Well, honestly, worse. So this is the time of year, May and June, where we should be getting the rains that will sustain us, or at least get crops going in the early part of or late spring, early summer, right? So if we miss it, if we miss our precipitation in the spring, it's not good for the rest of the year. And we have to wait until the cold season again to start building up a real snowpack and improve soil moisture and things like that. So in many cases, as you can see from these maps, again, looking back the last 30 days during, some of the wettest times of the year, usually, we didn't get it. And again, the image on the left is temperature. Any place it's yellow phasing to red, it's above normal temperatures, and in some cases up to 6 to 8 degrees above. And I know you know this because you've just lived through a really hot beginning of June. Image on the right is the percent again of normal precipitation. And now we're seeing, a lot of area, especially in Wyoming and Montana, below the 25% of normal for that 30-day period. And then some pretty expansive red area, which is below 50%. The only places with above normal are some small areas in North Dakota, a little bit out in far western Montana, and again down in portions of Colorado and in Kansas. You can see all the red. That's not good in this case. Of below 50% of normal precipitation during the wetter time of year. Just to make us more depressed, I looked at, I took the temperatures and precipitation since the beginning of June. Temperatures have been at record level in terms of heat during this period, and sort of a long period of heat too. We're setting records for for as long as the heat has lasted. So there are places in, for example, southeast Montana that are over 10 degrees above normal for the first 21 days of June, which is phenomenal from a climatological point of view. It's hard to do that, but we did, and so a lot of records there. No place in the Missouri Basin was below normal in terms of temperature. In terms of precipitation, first 21 days, yep, some spots in North Dakota did get some beneficial rain. However, not enough, and you need it over a long period of time. And if you get 5 inches in 1 hour, it doesn't do you a lot of good and all that kind of stuff. That's what they had up there with some of those rains. And probably didn't improve things too much. I'm sure people wanted it, but they want a lot more, and they want it over a long period of time too. So dire conditions up to this point. We're looking at soil moisture here, a couple different ways of looking at it, but it's more or less the same thing. Again, where you see orange and yellows and sort of reddish colors and brown colors is well below normal in terms of soil moisture, which is really the memory, if you will, of the landscape. You really want to have, you don't want to have soil moisture lacking, because then any rain that you get goes, doesn't go very far. It goes into trying to make up for the deficit that you already have. Anyway, soil moisture is not in a good position either for the rest of the summer. It's a little early, to be honest. It's a little, let me back up. It's a little early to be this dry. And again, we're missing sort of our May and June rains. So it's all unfortunate. Now, looking forward, the next 7 days, this is out till June 30th of next week. So next Wednesday morning, this is a 7-day accumulated total amount of precipitation that we may see across the country over this time. And you may look up in some of the worst areas of the northern plains again, and see that there's chances for quarter, half an inch maybe at the most in some of those worst places. But this is no drought breaker by any means. In fact, it's sort of dry. It's sort of continuing that dry trend. You got to get down to, well, unfortunately, where I live to start seeing, in Kansas City to start seeing, in Iowa start seeing some of the huge rains that may happen over the next 7 days. Probably will. I don't know if we're going to get 7 to 10 inches, but like it's forecasted in Indiana and Illinois, and we certainly don't need that much. But again, the wetness is sort of constrained to the southern part of the Missouri Basin, and you can see that on that. The 14-day outlook, or I should say June 30th, beyond what we just looked at. So this is up to June 30th. This is beyond June 30th. The next week beyond that, the image on the left shows the probability of being above normal temperature. And there's an 80% line over there in Idaho, western Montana, and in the Northwest, basically. NOAA is calling for record to near record temperatures in this area, and really is not very cool as you move to the east of that, where we all are, especially in the northern plains. So look forward to another week or so of above normal temperatures, which is exactly what we don't want. And then below normal precipitation, during that week as well. At least that's what the probabilities are leaning towards. Wet to the east, somewhat wet to the southwest, where they also need a lot of rain. But in the northwest and north central part of the U.S., nope, just dry and super hot, which is, again, a little early in the year to see this. We do a hazards map on a daily basis. This sort of is highlighting where that excessive heat is forecast to be for that week, the June 30th through through the 4th into the 6th of July. And you see the core there in Idaho, but those other lines, those other dotted lines also show you where there's some chance of having excessive. That means if not record, still 10 to 15 degrees above normal temperatures in those areas outlined in those dotted lines. And that's just basically probabilities there. The higher probability on Idaho, less as you go away from that. So if we look at the whole month of July, I wish I had better news. Again, the outlook is for that core area in the west to stay warm. The probabilities are for warmth in the west, stretching across the northern plains, although the probabilities are a little bit lower as you go that way. And then in terms of precipitation, the right-hand map there, unfortunately, again, probabilities lean towards being drier than normal as well during the month, averaging over the whole entire month. And then taking that a step further, July, August, and September, all totaled together, the same basic pattern holds in there with above normal temperatures, image on the left, pretty strongly. It's not going to be a great year for a lot of issues out in the west. And then that dryness on the image on the right also holding in there, and maybe even extending down a little further south and southwest, all the way down to Kansas and northern New Mexico and such. Here's the drought. This will be updated tomorrow, but here's the current drought monitor for the for the Missouri Basin. You can see where it's really bad up there in North Dakota and portions of South Dakota and Montana as well. And despite some of that, the image on the right is where things have improved over the last 4 weeks. I think we're going to see that, based upon what I've seen so far, a lot of that deteriorate. All those green areas or light green areas are going to sort of deteriorate this week, and certainly next week or the week following, and more yellow, which means developing more worsening drought over that period, those areas as well. I do see improvement though for Iowa and maybe eastern Nebraska with some of those rains that are forecast over the next month or next week. So this is one of the issues we're going to be facing is, this is our green up time of year. We didn't get a lot of green up in a lot of areas. A lot of people are saying, what green up? Well, according to the predictive services, the fire folks, for July, those red areas are really enhanced for significant wildland fire potential. And in August, boy, that stretches all the way to Minnesota, which I don't know how often that happens, but I'm guessing not very often. So, these guys look at the forecast too to figure out where fire is going to be an issue. And so, I wish I had better news. There's a lot of key points here. There's some stuff that isn't so important, like that ENSO comment, the El Nino La Nina thing. No meaningful influence at this time of year. And conditions already are dry to extremely dry, record dry in some places. The heat has definitely taken its toll, especially since June 1st. Short term, next 2 weeks, more or less, temperatures, we're going to have a brief cool down this weekend. But that's probably the last one we're going to see for a while before things heat up and stay hot, for the foreseeable future. And some near record temperatures in terms of heat also coming. Precipitation really favors below normal. I don't know why I said beyond, but certainly the next 7 days, but beyond that as well. The longer term outlooks show pretty much the same things in terms of drier and above normal temperatures. The concerns, again, I probably don't need to tell you this stuff, but things to think about from here on out. We've mentioned wildfire, smoke, and people's health. If anybody works in that arena, water quantity and quality for everyone and every livestock and everything else, ecosystems, is going to be an issue. There are long-lasting, near to record heat going to be happening over the summer. Of course, in terms of agriculture, you know what you're up against in terms of crops and grazing and lack of food, lack of forage. I'm sure there's going to be recreation impacts, navigation impacts on the Missouri River are very likely, and then health, and then just general health issues. We will. I probably should have put this in here, but I didn't. I hadn't planned it yet. But we will have another webinar, not just for tribes specifically, but for the public. We're actually planning one on July 1st, and I have not sent out that webinar registration, but we do a monthly version of that every third Thursday of every month. So that's the regular one I have advertised on here. If you want to get on those and listen to what we have to say, sort of like what I'm doing now, but with a little more depth across the whole north central part of the U.S., you can get on those. Those are something we regularly do. We're doing one also at July 1st at 11 a.m. Central Time, and I'll send that out to a number of folks, and we'll get that sent around too. And that's sort of, if you will, a ramping up of our activities due to the concern for drought, mainly in the northern plains. So I think I'm done. Thank you.
Thanks, Doug. Yeah, helpful assessment and outlook. That's a good setup for our next speakers, and a fairly sobering.
Are we doing questions at the very end? I'm sorry, Steph.
I think in the just looking at the time, we should potentially wait till the end. People are welcome to put them in the chat, and we can get to them at the end. I think we should keep moving. Let's see here. Let me share my screen. All right. Can you see my screen? Doug, you're going to be my check. Can you see it?
Check.
Great, thanks. Okay, our next two speakers are Darrel Duvall and Stan Boltz, who both work for the Natural Resources Conservation Service. Darrel joined the Soil Conservation Service, or NRCS, in 1994 as a sophomore in college, and has worked several locations and positions across South Dakota, from the southern foothills of the Black Hills to the Glacial Lakes region of the northeastern South Dakota. He has served as NRCS Field Tribal Liaison for the Crow Creek Sioux and Lower Brule Sioux tribes since 2008. He recently also acquired duties as State Tribal Liaison for NRCS within South Dakota. And then right after Darrel will be Stan. And Stan is a regional soil health specialist with the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service in Huron, South Dakota. Stan has worked for the USDA NRCS for 33 years, most of that time as a range management specialist in Nevada and South Dakota. Stan graduated with a BS in agronomy with a range and forage production option from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln in 1987. All right, take it away, Darrel.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you sound great.
And if not, please let me know, and I'll put earbuds in with a microphone. And but I'm surprised you had to ask if you could see my picture, because when my picture popped up, I'm sure there was just all kinds of exuberation throughout the whole northern plains when they see me, right? I thought you could just feel it. Hi, everyone. Yeah, Darrel Duvall. I've been with NRCS since '94, and it's an agency within Department of Ag, Federal Department of Ag. So I work closely with BIA, but I am not BIA and not part of the Department of Interior. So since I do work on tribal communities a lot, sometimes that is a question that I get. Just a short bit of history. So I My great grandfather traveled down the Hudson out of Canada and settled around his parents settled around the Michigan area at that time. And he come to South Dakota as a teenager, 14-year-old, as a hired hand, family that moved to this area of central South Dakota and settled in the area. And that is where I currently live again now, in between the towns of Puckwana and Crow Creek community on the eastern side of the Missouri River. You see that I also am working also as a state tribal liaison. So please, those of you who are listening or who will hear a recording, don't be afraid to get a hold of NRCS where you're at, or get a hold of me through either the email that you'll see or phone calls, and we can get you directed in the right correct direction. Next slide. I'll just visit a little bit on the history of NRCS just for a minute or two, since I got your attention, and how we do things and the programs that we can use now and in the future, and that we have been using on a regular basis to prepare for drought and other problems, and what are some of our customers are doing now. Next. And yes, sometimes we get questions, can we use these financial programs on trust lands? Because sometimes there's confusion about whether it's federal land or not federal land. And of course, it is not federal land. Our programs are available on tribal trust or allotted trust or fee simple lands. There's no problem using our financial programs or technical assistance on trust lands. Go ahead. And yes, of course, we can have contracts directly with the tribal government, with the tribe itself, or with tribal corporations, or with tribal individuals, entities. We got quite a few options. Sometimes we just got to work on getting the proper paperwork set up, but we'll help with that. And just a bit of history, if you don't know, for those that don't, we was created in the dirty 30s from as a soil erosion service through a couple of name changes in '94 to the Natural Resources Conservation Service to better describe, next slide, that we are working on all the natural resources, not just soil and erosion, including our water quantity that we're dealing with right now, or water quality, whether it be surface water or groundwater. Of course, a little bit of air concerns, plants adapted to the site, animal needs, whether that's livestock or wildlife, and recently added energy to our list of concerns that we have a congressional authority to address and try to reduce wasted energy, whether that be field operations or in building and communities such as that. Here I'm working with some individuals, and we're describing a plan we're talking about for some creek crossings for setting of rotational grazing at Lower Brule. Next slide. And as part of that process, we do a inventory of the situation, your characteristics, and what we have for equipment to work with, formulate some different options, develop this plan. Go ahead. I didn't get that. Excuse me. As far as the inventory, we do look at this soils. You can see that one has some compaction in it, whether that's in a grazing land that shows some severe compaction for being repeatedly grazed on wet, or just repeatedly grazed on not having the deep roots, native roots. And as you can see, we can inventory the fence situations and what the grass looks like on both sides of the fence, and musk thistle in the other picture. Next slide. And of course, in this situation, we're finding a lot of these ponds that are just, they're beyond their lifespan. So it's not necessarily that drought was the only problem, but in that picture to the left, the spillway has been washed out, and so it was not functioning for the last 20 years or like it should have been. And typically, we got to remember these ponds only have a lifespan of a certain number of years. Depending on the erosivity of the soils above it, they fill up with silt, and therefore your bathtub is smaller. Therefore, the rainfall events cause more water going through the earthen spillways or the pipe spillways, and therefore they just don't last. They just don't have that deep, at least 12 foot of depth of dugout size behind the dam as they were originally designed. So when we're doing these inventories and I'm seeing these ponds, If it's not a new pond within 5 to 10 years and really deep, I'm not counting it as reliable water source to count on. And we're looking at sources of either piped water or another deep pond to get built. Ponds, earthwork in this part of the world is expensive. Usually it's a lot cheaper to run lots of pipeline if we can get access to water. Most of the time, if the ponds are washed out or have a narrow embankment on it, and we're doing this planning ahead of time, we're going to plan a new pond below or above the old pond because it's cheaper. It gets very expensive to put a new pond on top of an old silted in pond because you have such a long span to cross for the embankment. Just a lot of cubic yards. And we don't know the how well the core trench and structure was built underneath on top of the original sod, anywhere from 40 to 100 years ago at times. Next slide. And I just want to show that bottom right slide. We have helped with some shredding of cedar trees. Next slide. And part of that shredding, in this particular case, Lower Brule is using this shredder mounted on the skid steer. We do help with those for fire break and fuel reduction. Wildfire hazard fuels is a concern we have congressional authority to address and work with. So sometimes we might help with reducing fuel around communities, and also for creating fire breaks, for creating burns to reduce invasive cedar trees, and bringing back the native grass community. Next slide. Of course, we formulate those options here. I'm working with wildlife manager at Lower Brule, and on their big game unit, we talked about we're going to install some pipeline tanks for setting up a rotational grazing system or build some new ponds. Next slide. Programs wise, it comes into money. That's usually when people are asking the questions of how can you help financially. And of course, once we get that plan done and we got some type of engineering that says this will work and you have agreed to the plan, we typically use this EQIP, Environmental Quality Incentives Program, that is most often used for structural practices such as tanks, ponds, cross fence to set up rotation so we have a deeper roots so we can build organic matter and withstand these normal droughts as we the best we can. Yes, we can develop one plan. That plan can be documented and is used oftentimes in my arena. We will use an NRCS program plus other programs. Sometimes BIA might help. Sometimes the South Dakota Game Fish and Parks or that state Game Fish and Parks department will help financially with those projects in that plan. That will include management of rotational grazing, usually when we're talking about grass or cropland, same situation. Stewardship program is a 5-year program that has incentive money for improving your current management, whether it be grazing management or fertilizer management on cropland. Ask questions on those programs. Regional Conservation Partnership Program is where we're trying to leverage more dollars and partner up with other sources, whether that be tribal dollars or some other partner that can put money towards a focused effort. We also always have some other grants, innovative or cooperative grants. We're working on trying to go towards managing natural resources for long-term sustainability. Easements are an option. And I believe Zane may visit a little bit about CRP and Farm Service Agency options, so I'm going to leave that be for now. Next slide. Next slide. Save a little bit of time. I just want to highlight that every time we can increase organic matter in our rangelands by having a rotation that allows adequate regrowth, if we can build up another, each 1% of organic matter we build up, whether that's in rangeland or in cropland, can hold a lot of water, and that will withstand and get you through these drier years much easier. Next slide. I'm gonna let Stan talk on our drought tool. But here I just pulled it up for Fort Pierre, Western Lyman County, showing we are on 55% normal of plant production. Next slide. Next slide. I'm gonna let Stan take into here here's where we're at now, and Stan can visit a little bit on the indicators and then what we should be doing now, our customers, what they're doing who have this plan in place and what they're already doing because of this drought that they predicted a long time ago. Stan, you can unmute and go.
Okay, I think if you can advance to my presentation there. Skip. Okay, all right. So yeah, go ahead next. I just wanted to point out, and you can click next. Point out that really, you know, we talk about a drought plan, and oftentimes you think about it being implemented after the drought starts. But to really get the benefit of good planning, you have to start planning long before the drought happens. And just as an example, range that's in good condition going into a drought is going to produce more quantity and higher quality during the drought. And it also has been shown to rebound more rapidly after a drought ends, typically a full year or more before a rangeland that's in lower condition. Next. And so prescribed grazing really builds in resiliency in our rangeland. And we've seen with our dynamic soil property study sites that this kind of management leads to higher infiltration, less runoff. So you're really storing more water in the soil profile. It leads to more plant diversity and higher production overall. And those soil functions that Darrel mentioned are just going to be functioning at a higher level. Next. So just to kind of reiterate, to be effective, a drought plan needs to be developed long before the drought starts. But if you haven't developed one, really the only drought plan that's going to fail is one that you start to put together after the drought starts. But even then, that's still good to build that plan and try to follow it. Better to do it before the drought, but you can do it after the drought starts too. All right, next. So I'm going to run through the drought tool real quick. It's South Dakota drought tool. Next. It is specific for grasslands, this particular tool. So it's for managing grazing and that type of thing. And next, just somebody, I think it was Shane, one of the developers of the drought tool, kind of just did a quick math on it, and 21% of the years since, I think he said since 1940 would be considered drought. And so really the question isn't, you know, if drought's going to happen, it's when it's going to happen. It's just going to happen. Next. So really the drought tool is pretty easy. It's kind of a 3-step process really. Step 1 is multi-step, but you choose your county. Next. Okay, and then you choose a climate station from that county. Right now in the drought tool, we have the NOAA co-op stations, we have RAWS stations, we have COCA-RAWS stations, and there's a couple of SNOWTEL stations in there as well. But you pick the one that is closest to you. Next. If you're not sure, there's that blue arrow next, I think is, yeah, that blue arrow right there. It brings up a map and that'll show you all the climate stations around you. You can decide which one is the best to use. And also, I didn't mention it, but at the top of the list, there's a do county average. So it'll calculate the average of all the stations in that county. Then you just click on next. Yeah, so I keep saying next. All right. And then this little screen pops up just saying that it takes about a minute or so, probably less, depending on your internet connection, to pull up all the precip data. And so next. This is step 2. It brings up the precip data for the station you selected. And then next, you have the opportunity in this table below to enter your own precip data. So if there's a month in particular that you think that station 30 miles away is different than what you had, you can enter that data. It'll just kind of override it. But I'll answer that question later, maybe if you wait a second. So then if you have your own data though, you can fill in the whole table. And actually I can answer that really quick. When it brings up the station, it doesn't show the period of record for that station off that list, but I do have that information in a table in the drought tool. Good good question, and maybe something to think about adding so you kind of have an idea what the period of record is. Good question. All right, next. So if you have your own precipitation data, and here's a couple examples. On the right is a Kokoraz gauge. They're great. I have one that is mine right there that I took a picture of. And then on the left is an automated weather station. I can help if you're interested. I can set up the Drought tool to automatically bring in data from an automated weather station if you have one of those. So next. So here's step 3, basically is it shows you the drought status. And here next, the first number there is kind of a current status of the estimated soil moisture conditions and potential production. This was ran in April of 26th of April this year at Huron. And so it's showing at that time, we were at 108%. The prediction, the next one, is predicting the future production based on normal precip in the future. So from April 26th to July 1st, which is basically the peak production, if we had had normal precipitation, we would have still been at 100%. As we know now, that didn't happen. But next. Then it's just a statement that kind of tells what to expect with the conditions at the time. Next. This drought status, keep this in mind. It puts it in a status of normal, at risk, or in drought. And we'll talk about that a little bit more when we talk about the drought plan. Next. There's also recently we added a prediction for hayland. Like I said, this is for grazing lands, grasslands, but the equations are a little bit different for hayland. And so there's a prediction for hayland production as well as of April 26th anyway in this one. Next. And there's, if you want to look at the 30-day and 90-day outlooks, and I think that Doug mentioned, you can click on here. It takes you to that page so you can kind of see what the future conditions are potentially going to be or what they're predicted. So you can, and then to the left of that, there's a drop down on that. So you can change it to above normal, below normal, or normal for the future. That'll affect that July 1st prediction. And I hear somebody unmuted. Was there a question or? Excuse me. All right, next. So the summary page from the drought tool just tells you, again, what your current status is, what the projected peak production status is, and then there's a suggested % of normal stocking. So as you get more and more closer to that threshold value that we want to keep for resources for the plants, plant health and that type of stuff, the % of normal stocking is going to decrease more rapidly than the current status would suggest that it would be. So in this case, this is not the same example I had on the previous slide, but in this case, they were 79% of normal production, current status, but their suggested % of normal stocking is 77.9 or 78% of normal stocking. So if you know you have, let's say 200 head of cows, you would know that you need to cut off, well, whatever 20% is off of that, can't do the math in my head right now, but anyway. And then if you page down next, there is a place to develop your drought plan. And so for each one of those status levels, phase 1, phase 2, or phase 3, and when I mentioned doing your drought plan ahead of time, you go in here and you look at the list of recommendations that are below this, and you, for your operation, you put in your own list of actions that you would put into place if drought occurred on your place. And it's triggered by these different risk levels. When you reach those, then you implement the actions there. Next. And so here's just an example, just to point out that this is the operator's plan. This is your plan if you're an operator. You can put in historic actions, ideas and concepts to try, recommendations from universities or NRCS. Our role as NRCS is not to tell you or regulate how to do it, but to advise and kind of guide. Next. So trigger points, next. When you hear a lot of people talking about a drought plan, usually they talk about trigger points or trigger dates. Usually these are specific dates when you would evaluate your conditions and then make or implement decisions in that drought plan. Next. With the drought tool, the trigger points, like I mentioned, are based on current conditions. So if based on what phase you're in, and you've already developed that drought plan with the actions kind of listed in each of those phases, then when you reach that phase, you basically would consider those things and implement them at that time. So next, I think that's it. Yes, that is it. So were there any other questions? I think I answered the one, but we can get them at the end, I guess, Stefan. So
Yeah, I think so. Thanks, Stan. Yeah, we can get them at the end, put them in the chat if you have more questions. There was a question about whether or not we can share presentations, so I will let each speaker determine if that's okay. I have, I think, all of them, so you guys can let me know if that's okay with you at your discretion.
Yes, you can.
Thanks, Doug. Our next speaker is Zane Not Afraid. Zane grew up in Lodgegrass, Montana on the Crow Reservation. Zane's family raises cattle and horses and also participates in rodeos throughout the summer. Zane and his wife and daughter currently reside in Dillon, Montana, where they completed their degrees in business management at the University of Montana Western. And Zane is excited to work with Intertribal Agriculture Council as a technical assistant specialist to serve the Rocky Mountain region, Native American farmers and ranchers. Zane, it's all yours.
Thank you. I'll be presenting a few resources and some information related to drought. I'll just do a quick overview for Intertribal Agriculture Council though, just to start off. Next. These are just our 5 operational goals. You can read through them right there too. Our mission is to pursue and promote the conservation, development, and the use of our agriculture resources for the betterment of our people. The IC was born out of the massive aid crisis of the late 1980s. Native producers had a very difficult time accessing USDA programs and resources. A lot of Indian farmers and ranchers were 5 times more likely to go bankrupt than a national average. The IEC was founded by 87 charter member tribes in 1987 and has undertaken challenges to reverse those trends. Before 1990, there was no mention of Native American ag interests in the Farm Bill. So we continue our work to ensure inclusion and to increase access to resources for Native American producers and communities. Next. So I'll be presenting, this is the first picture that in 1987 at the board meeting that they're first established. Next. I'm a technical assistant specialist, and this is a map of we have 12 regions similar to the BIA format regions. We identify resources for individual tribal producers, tribal food sovereignty initiative support. We're the on-ground coordination with all our programs to support producer engagement, Native youth and food and agriculture mentoring and leadership development. Next. So I'll be talking on a few FSA programs, the first being the LFP Livestock Forage Program. This is a map that is all the counties eligible for this LFP program. It's color coded from like severe to extreme. This program offers payments to the producers with eligible livestock. The payments help with grazing losses and suffered on native or improved pasture land. And this can be land with permanent or planted grazing covers. The FSA will calculate these payments. The first is the yellow, so that's like 1 payment. The brown is 3 payments, and then 4 is 5, and then the severe, the purple is the 5. These colors represent the payments for equal to 60% of the monthly feed costs. They calculate this by using normal carrying capacity of the grazing land. The most common eligible livestock may include alpacas, llamas, beef, dairy, buffalo, deer, elk, poultry, equine, goat, sheep, and swine. The livestock producer must own cash or share leases or be a contract grower of livestock during the 60 calendar days before the qualifying drought. And then they must provide pasture land or grazing land for the livestock, including cash rented land. They must certify that you have suffered a grazing loss because of the qualifying drought, and then they must file a timely acreage report for their loss. You can submit this at your local FSA office. Submit required documents like within 30 days a month. Next, the next program I want to talk about is NAP, a Non-Insurable Crop Disaster Assistance Program. This program offers producers of eligible crops to protect against low yields, loss of inventory, or preventing of plant due to natural disaster. It requires a service fee, but in exchange, the program issues a payment when a national disaster affects your county. You may qualify if you're a landowner, tenant, or a sharecropper. The NAP service fees are up to $325 per crop, $825 producer per county, but the producer has the option to select higher levels of coverage, but they must pay additional premium fees. But the beginning, if you're a beginning limited resources or a socially disadvantaged group, you may qualify for a waiver of those service fees and a 50% premium reduction. And you can also apply for those at your FSA field office. If you have trouble finding the information for your field office, you can contact me on my email, my phone, I can point you in direct direction. This program is for next year's coverage, so it won't be immediately for this program, but if I recommend it because, like how we said before, droughts are inevitable. So this would be a good resource tool. Next. The next program is FSA Emergency CRP Haying and Grazing. This is a map that also shows the eligible counties. This program is strictly for if you have CRP coverage. It's for emergency haying. Producers are limited to one cutting though, and they're permitted to sell the hay. Participants must remove all hay from the CRP acreage within 15 days after baling it though, and remove all livestock from the CRP acreage no later than 1 day after the end of the emergency grazing period. Next. And you can only hay or graze the CRP acres within the primary nesting season. And so if you can see on that map, your state, right now it's closed, but until summer, July and August. Acres ineligible for CRP use are useful life easements if the land is within 20 feet of a stream or permanent water body. If acres where haying or grazing would cause long-term damage to CRP cover, then they're ineligible. But other than that, the CRP grazing haying is a pretty good resource. Next. The last FSA program is the Emergency Livestock Assistance Program, ELAP. This program provides financial assistance for cover losses due to eligible weather or events, blizzards, wildfires, diseases, and water shortages. The general program requirements are you physically located in the county where the eligible adverse weather or loss condition occurred? 2, had adequate livestock watering system or facilities before the eligible adverse weather or loss condition occurred? And 3, do you not normally require the transport of water by the producer? The eligible adverse weather, any area of the county that has been rated by the U.S. Drought Monitor as having a D3 extreme drought intensity that directly impacts water availability and at any time during the normal grazing period are eligible, but not limited to. Costs associated with water transport equipment fees, labor, and contracted water transportation fees, but not include the cost of the water itself. The ELAP application period ends at the end of the year, December 31st. Next. And then a few other resources I wanted to outline. The U.S. Drought Monitor reporting is just another reporting resource that offers producers an opportunity to submit drought impacts and condition reports. And the bottom there, the right, you can see there's the URL. You can find that website. Next. The last resource I want to talk about is the hay hotlines. So each state that I've found was Dakota, Nebraska, and Montana. They have the websites that you could call or to see who's buying or selling or donating hay to access hay or forage. Next. And just a little recap. So if you forgot one of those programs, there's LFP, NAP, ELAP, and emergency CRP haying and grazing, and the hay hotlines in the U.S. drought model reporting. Next. And then you can contact my other colleagues. The Great Plains TA specialist is Fanny Brewer. She covers North Dakota, South Dakota, and Nebraska. And the Southwest region is Desba Badilla, and she covers Colorado and Mexico. Their information is right there. If you need to contact them, they can point you in the right direction for those FSA field offices to ask more questions and details about those programs. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Zane. And just so you know, we're coming up at the end of the hour, but we're going to obviously stay on. We've got one more speaker. And if you do have to jump off, that's okay. We'll post this recording on our YouTube channel. The link is in the chat right now. So for those that are able to stay, we have next Miranda Meehan. Miranda is Extension Livestock Environmental Stewardship Specialist in the Animal Sciences Department at North Dakota State University. Her extension responsibilities include development of statewide livestock environmental stewardship program materials, offering training for livestock producers, extension personnel, and other professionals in the livestock industry. Miranda also recently took on the role of Extension Disaster Coordinator. Her research involves understanding the ecology of rangeland ecosystems and assisting landowners in managing their resources in a profitable and sustainable manner. Miranda, go ahead.
All right, well, thanks for inviting me. So over the past, we actually started a program in 2018, working with county agents, assessing livestock water quality, and giving them some tools to do that. And it really worked out and was very timely as we headed into this drought, because water quality is significantly impacted during drought just due to the evapotranspiration. Next. So one of the things that we obviously see is water availability issues. I'm not going to focus on that. I'm going to focus on quality. This picture though is from Mercer County, North Dakota. So central North Dakota, west central. And one of them is from April, and then the same dugout in May. So with our exceptional drought conditions in that area, it significantly impacted water availability, as well as across the rest of the state. We're seeing this. In terms of quality, the things we see is as that water evaporates, we see an increase in the salts in that water, including the total dissolved solids and sulfates. The other component is, especially with the above average heat that Doug talked about, is increased risk for cyanobacteria, our blue-green algae blooms, and the toxicity associated with that. Next. So we talked about TDS. There's some thresholds. When we get above 3,000 parts per million, we start to see performance issues in livestock. So even outside of drought, if we have this poorer water quality, is really a good idea to look at alternative water sources. Some of the programs through NRCS or even your state that can help you develop those and increase your drought resilience at the same time as improving performance. As we increase to above that 3,000 or 5,000, we start to see increased diarrhea, things like that in those animals. And then as it increases, impacts to pregnant lactating animals. And in extreme cases, we do see central nervous system disorders and death. Next, sulfates is one of those components in the TDS. And a rule of thumb, basic recommendation is that they should be less than 500 parts per million for calves, 1,000 for mature cattle. However, that is dictated a little bit by the diet. So when we look at grazing systems, we do have higher thresholds. And I know there's data out there from ARS that shows these being even higher, but it really depends on your environment and local situation. So I always recommend folks consult with their local veterinarian, also having a baseline outside of drought of what your animals are consuming, because your animals will adapt to an extent to what you have available for water. We also want to be careful when we're introducing new animals to a water source that may be higher than they're used to consuming in terms of both TDS and sulfates. Next. So what are some of the symptoms we should be looking for in terms of sulfates? Sulfate, one of the main things it does, it actually increases copper deficiency. It ties up copper. And in many of our rangelands in the Northern Great Plains, we're already copper deficient. So this can create an even greater copper deficiency. Again, we'll see that loose stool at those lower elevations. And then in extreme cases, we do see those central nervous system disorders, and we can see bovine polio. Next slide. So what we have done is most of our extension agents across North Dakota have these tools, and anyone can buy these tools. I know lots of soil conservation districts have them as well. And they have handled TDS, or electroconductivity meter, which estimates TDS levels based off of the conductivity of that water. So you go out wherever those animals are drinking from and you take a sample and you will measure that electroconductivity. And we recommend submitting a sample if that reading is above 4,500 parts per million, because once we get above that, we start to see health impacts, but also the readings actually get confounded because it is estimating off of electroconductivity, so they're not as accurate once we get above that threshold. And we can buy these, they're available through a couple places. Amazon's one, they're around $80 for a decent one. So it's not a huge investment. The sulfate test strips also available on Amazon. You get 100 of them for $40. So, and these have been we've seen this year being a more sensitive measure, fairly easy to use. You're just going to dip the strip in that water sample and then line up the little boxes are going to change color. You're going to line that up with the side of the container and see where you fall within that range. I recommend submitting a sample, or at least monitoring and your animals, and submitting another sample in the future potentially if we're above 800 parts per million. Next slide. Cyanobacteria or blue-green algae. As I said, blooms are we're probably gonna see, I know we've started seeing them up here in North Dakota this past week, and it produces, not all species are toxic, but there are several species that are toxic. They produce neurotoxins and liver toxins, and the impact of these is very, very quick. When within 20 minutes of consumption, unfortunately, there's no data on levels of thresholds of consumption. So best recommendation is excluding animals from these sources until the blooms cleared up, and working with NRCS on those long-term solutions and putting in a buffer, because a perennial buffer, and managing that buffer, keeping animals out of the water, any ways that we can reduce nutrients, because the cause of these blooms are excess nitrogen and phosphorus within that water system. And once they're there, once we have it, it's very difficult to get rid of and safely. And we want to, even after bloom dissipates, we want to wait at least a week before putting animals back in there, because the toxins are actually released when the algae or the bacteria dies. And so it actually increases in toxicity after the bloom disappears for a little bit. So we want to be really careful with that. Next slide. Unfortunately, not a good test for this. So our veterinary diagnostic lab here in North Dakota, I'm sure other states it's similar, that you can send in a sample. We want to be careful in handling that sample because it's toxic to wildlife, pets. It's also toxic to humans. Well, you'll get a rash, could have respiratory issues. So we want to be careful handling that sample, but they can confirm if the species that produce the toxins are present, but they can't look at, or they can't assess toxicity level. There's only a couple labs in the US that do that, and it's very expensive. So the best is just, doing that visual observation, and you can always send it for that species analysis as well. Next slide. We have in all our county offices is our extension, and I know soil conservation districts as well. They have water sampling kits. This is a guideline that goes with it and it outlines labs available in the state that do the water screenings and the protocol for safely collecting that sample to submit to the lab. Next slide. So to date in North Dakota, it's greater now, but over 500 samples have been screened. Of those screened, 35 have had toxic levels or potentially toxic levels of total dissolved solids. 43 have had potentially toxic levels of sulfates. And then we've had 3 that have had documented cyanobacteria. 39 of those have been sent to the lab. Several producers, are just being cautious watching animals and excluding animals. But we know that this is really common during drought. In 2017, this headline that we see here was from 2017, where over 200 cows were lost due to sulfate toxicity in Saskatchewan. And we had several cases, not that large, here in North Dakota as well in 17. Next slide. So it's just this map of what we've been seeing to date. And this is total dissolved solids. People keep asking, is there a specific area? And it's really all over the place, from eastern North Dakota and Grand Forks County to western North Dakota. And so it's just, doing the screening and checking things is probably your safest bet, and making a decision based off of those screenings. The next slide shows our sulfate levels, and sulfates, we tend to have a lot more sites that have had potentially toxic levels of sulfates. We had one down in Emmons County that was actually 11,000 parts per million sulfates, and they had some animals that were down at that location. So we've had some pretty extreme cases in the state this year. Next slide. Solutions, immediate solutions is restricting, eliminating access to that water source. And then looking in providing alternative water, whether that's hauling water, or opening up a different pasture, moving those animals. And then in the long term, the solutions for this is obviously trying to look into developing a water. There's several programs for hauling water. I know Zane mentioned maybe the ELAT program through FSA, developing water. I know a drought related FSA program, if your county is eligible, signs up for it and is approved, is a CO. I can't think of it right now. I'll come back to that. But there's only one county in North Dakota eligible right now. North Dakota and the state actually has, the State Water Commission has a program that they've given out $2.4 million to fund 600 water development projects across the state this year to help address this shortage. So there are several programs available to help develop water and increase drought resilience in the future. Next slide. And there's my contact information. If you're in North Dakota, feel free to reach out to your local extension agent or myself, and in other states as well, reach out to me if you want more information. I'm happy to help however I can.
Thank you so much, Miranda. Looks like we don't have any other questions in the chat box right now, but if folks do have a question, feel free to type it in. You're also welcome to take yourself off mute and ask any of our speakers a question. And just a note there, I put in the chat the YouTube link where the recording will be, and I'll repost that right now as well for easier access. So that should be posted sometime this afternoon for folks who missed the beginning, and we'll also send it around for folks that missed the end. All right, well, if there are no questions, then I think we can wrap it up. I want to say thank you to all of our speakers, Doug, Darrel, Stan, Zane, and Miranda. Thank you to all of you for attending, and we will be putting out another webinar in July, so stay tuned for that. The specific topic is kind of yet to be determined, but we appreciate your participation. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Steph. I was just going to mention for the next webinar, if you do have thoughts or ideas on what would be useful to hear about, definitely reach out to Stefan or myself. We can put our emails in the chat box.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that, Molly.
You forgot to say let it rain, Stefan.
Yeah, well, let's do some rain dances. We really need it. All right, well, thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day and the rest of your week, and pray for rain.
Thanks.